We were really hoping for peaceful protest, and I mean that. We talked about it as early as this evening, saying, what it's going to be like tonight. And, it might not be too bad. It might not be too bad is exactly what Captain Johnson said. And I shared that optimism. But frankly, as soon as Mr. McCullough announced the verdict, the officers started taking rocks and batteries.
Ferguson said they were ready. The National Guard was on hand. Yet when the grand jury announced its decision in the Michael Brown case, all hell was allowed to break loose. Buildings looted and burned, and those on the ground have been heard admitting they simply were not prepared. How was this allowed to happen? Let's welcome back to MidPoint. Former Los Angeles Police Department veteran, also author of the autobiography, The Creation of a Manifesto, Black and Blue. It's a pleasure to welcome Cheryl Dorsey back to the program. Sergeant, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Ed. Thank you for having me.
Sergeant, let's first get to what we heard from the police officer's view to the grand jury. From what you heard, do you agree that the grand jury did its job?
Well, I don't want to second guess a grand jury because I understand that great deference is given to police officers and jurors. Like most people, when an officer says a thing, you want to believe that officer's version. So to that extent, I guess they did their job. I personally don't believe that Officer Wilson was in fear to the extent that he explained he was to that jury.
Is it not fair, and I have to follow up on that because there's been talk about that, is it not fair to say, though, that police officers will feel fear at some point? And certainly you do fear for your life, and at times that takes over, and then training has to take over, correct?
Well, and that's why police officers receive the inordinate amount of training that they do, because we understand that this is a dangerous job. And so, you can't, if you're that fearful that you want to fire your weapon every time you're frightened, then you probably are in the wrong line of business. And so I understand the first couple of rounds that he may have fired out of fear, but what was he fearing for rounds 3 through 6? He's never articulated that. We've never heard an explanation beyond "I was just in fear."
Is it possible, though, that according to the grand jury testimony, that Michael Brown continued to come at him and he didn't know if his bullets had actually taken effect and he was trying to make sure that the subject was subdued?
It's also possible that that didn't happen, right? We don't know because we only have one version.
Yep, no, you're exactly right, and that's what we have to go on right now, and there's still a lot of questions. Let me ask you a serious question about what happened last night. We just spoke with the former mayor of Ferguson, Missouri. This man is in tears right now watching his town burn. He was told by the governor, by the people there, that this community was going to be protected. What did you see last night as someone who has been in Los Angeles, been in some tough situations? These people were not prepared at all.
Well, I don't understand why the police department wasn't prepared, because I believe that for the last 2 weeks they've been doing nothing but prepping for what could be a violent confrontation. And so I'm saddened that it happened that way, because the buildings that were damaged and the people who lost their businesses have really nothing to do with the angst. But I understand the frustration and I understand the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. What I would like to see is people take a different avenue in terms of trying to right that wrong.
Are you mystified, though, that with the National Guard apparently on hand, they were actually deployed in Chicago, but they were not deployed at the scene where the actual event happened? That in itself is astounding.
Well, I'm not mystified, but I'm certainly gratified, because who knows how many more lives would have been lost last night? Who knows how many more officers are out there fearful and scared and want to shoot their gun because someone raised their voice or someone came at them in a way that was frightening. So I'm glad that they didn't use those officers last night and those weapons that they've been amassing.
Do you think there might have been a thinking process, perhaps, let the buildings burn, let property damage happen, but make sure that we don't hurt anybody else? We don't take a chance on shooting anyone for even the wrong reasons?
Well, what concerns me is that maybe last night was just let them tear it up because we believe that this is what they're going to do. And so the protesters gave everyone in law enforcement what they wanted. They acted in a way that was inappropriate. And so my hope is that tonight they don't lay the smack down on the protesters, because last night it was a free-for-all. And so today, when the sun goes down, it'll be a very different situation. I hope that that doesn't happen.
You would agree from a law enforcement perspective, though, that if indeed they allowed to let them tear it up, that's the wrong thing to do.
Absolutely. I mean, come on. You take on this job with the understanding that, you're expected to make the hard decisions, right? And so that encompasses stopping people who are lawless and who are reckless. And so I don't condone anyone tearing up anything. You know, there's a way to appropriately handle that frustration, and last night was not an example of the right way to do that.
Would you go as far as to say law enforcement there was negligent in how they handled this?
Don't want to second guess them. I wasn't there. So I don't, you know, they were obviously doing what they were told to do. Now, maybe you ought to have a conversation with the command staff and find out why they didn't take a more aggressive and proactive approach in stopping the damage from being done.
Trust me, it is something that we will do, and we are going to follow up on it. As always, your comments are right on the point. Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey, thank you so much for joining us, and as always, I'll look forward to the next time we talk.
Look forward to it, Ed. Thank you so much.
Okay, breaking back as we go around the dial with veteran talker Grant Stinchfield on Ferguson and much more when MidPoint continues.